forward.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, the purpose of the session, we want to share some information back to you, kind of where we've got to in a lot of our thinking. So yeah, a lot of thinking behind, you know, Collective Wave has been stuff we've been working on for the past 18 months, really. So yeah, it's not sort of new, but it's obviously newly branded, and it's a really good opportunity to share that and get some feedback on it. Talk a bit about some momentum of building, some key partnerships we're getting in place, and some project work that we want to do. You know, a kind of open question to you guys about how you might like to be involved with some of the activities going forwards, and then really, yeah, to hear back from you guys, yeah, about your inputs, your thoughts, and kind of helping steer the ship a little bit today. So yeah, great. General housekeeping stuff, right? Yeah, just I think we're mostly recording this so we can sort of share it out a little bit, but also for our own records as well. Bulk of the session will be 30 minutes, and we'll have sort of 15 minutes for a bit of Q&A, a bit of discussion as well. But we'll be, yeah, we aim to keep this quite an interactive session. So yeah, Carl, appreciate you'll be gobbling some scrambled eggs at some point as well. But yeah, we're trying to get some conversation and dialogue going through the session. So yeah, next slide, please, Yasmin. So theory of change we'll talk about, and then some foundations, kind of what's guiding what we're doing, what the collective was all about, and then yeah, what the structure will be. So basically it's how we might do some stuff, why we want to do that stuff, and then how you might get involved. So yeah, scary shark. Scary shark picture. So theory of change. So we've spent a bit of time thinking about this. So it might be a little bit difficult. I don't know if everyone's got their screen on full view, but it doesn't matter if you don't. I'll talk through this. So we've been basically putting together a theory of change, which we think is really important to bring consistency to how we want to operate and how we want to deliver and run projects. So, you know, in the world of systems thinking, obviously it's all about dealing with complexity, looking at systems dynamics, looking at you know, complex systemic wicked challenges, often called wicked challenges. They're not actually a terminology I really like, I don't think, but you know, how we deal with complexity, really. So we've worked on an outline of a theory for change, really, and we're developing that as we go. And obviously, as we evolve and mature as a group, this will develop as well. And so very interested in hearing Sarah and Carl from you guys as well about really how you think this stacks up. At this point, what we're doing is we're just sort of sharing a very high level view on this, and we've got some sort of more detail underneath. But what we wanted to do was kind of use this session as a bit of an opportunity to discuss some key questions we have around these different phases. So there's kind of 3 phases effectively. I kind of avoided numbering them because I don't think any of us would really see them as working necessarily sequentially. But in reality, they may do a bit. So we're kind of thinking about a phase of, you know, and this is obviously if we're looking to deliver impactful projects into complex environments, maybe dealing with a particular, you know, complex challenge which we're trying to work on. So phase 1 is about kind of exploring, experimenting, so really understanding what the system landscape looks like, learning about some of the dynamics within the system, really kind of observing what's happening, and doing some systems mapping, you know, doing maybe some stakeholder interviews, getting a real sort of a rich picture of what that environment looks like, what systems are at play, what the dynamics are, and kind of learning from that. And then through some sort of, you know, action experiments, beginning to test some stuff out and seeing how the system might respond if we do some small actions and see what happens. And again, we'll kind of dig into this in a little bit more detail in a second. So kind of doing that kind of systems learning piece. A phase following from that could be kind of reflection and partnership phase, where we are taking what we've learned from that kind of exploration and experimentation phase and beginning to develop and construct some systems-led activities or actions that we want to take to affect the systems in some way, maybe the relationships between them. So we see partnership being really important and working with the capacity and the relationships already within that system. Maybe there's opportunity for improved partnership, maybe there's opportunities for new partnership. And then kind of the emerging impact phase. So, how can we take some of the activities we've done and really begin to embed it within that systemic environment in more kind of with more solid foundations, so that the impact we can have is long term. So maybe that might be looking at those new relationships again, but maybe new ways of working. It might be an educational piece. It might be looking at kind of a local policy thing. It might be looking at some resource that needs to go in there, with some new funding elements, or some new access to some different resources which can help that system, or the elements within that system, to improve in certain ways or have a change of circumstance. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. I guess, yeah, just as an overall, it'd be great to hear if that makes sense as I've described it. And what we have as well is we've got an opportunity to sort of dig in. I've put some key questions for these different phases, which I think it would be quite fun to explore with you guys. But it'd be great to hear a little bit of feedback, just first thoughts on whether you've seen something like this before. There's some issues that come to mind already, or you think it kind of makes sense. What's your thoughts? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I was quite interested to kind of hear about the theory of change, because I've seen quite a number which are linear, which make us lots of assumptions, and which I've kind of come away thinking, particularly where it's dealing with kind of quite a complex issue, that there's a risk, real risk, and in kind of oversimplifying and kind of just not somehow capturing the all the potential around the issue that's being explored through a theory of change. So, I mean, I think it's really positive to see I guess the interaction between the phases would strike me as really important. And I'm kind of remembering that phrase that I think somebody, might have been Hannah, I'm not sure, came up with when we met last time, when I was involved in the last session, which was something about creating the conditions of possibility, which I've always liked it, and it sounds familiar, Hannah, from way back. And I'm just wondering if there's a way of giving that a little bit of, making that a little bit more visible somehow. Because it strikes me that as well as having an impact, I guess I haven't really looked at the final box. I've just been looking at the middle bit that you've talked around, James. Yeah. But I was thinking it feels like there's an ongoing process of creating environments, isn't there, where there's more actors, there's more people feeling they can do that, they've got some sense of agency to act on a systemic issue. There's a kind of appetite for learning, there's shared learning going on. And for me, creating that environment is almost the fundamental kind of. Without that, nothing else will actually have an enduring impact in terms of systemic change. And I guess those things that you're talking about, the phases, are the ripples from those, the kind of the system it's created and creating, in a way, the environment it's creating, to avoid the word system again. Those phases will be contributing to that and sort of building that, and it'll keep evolving, and it's emergent. And I think it's I think there's something about that for me. but I like the exploring and experimenting, and then the reflection, and these things are kind of like that, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, it's an ongoing process, an iterative process. But I like the three things, and I like the simplicity of it. Having said, oh, hang on a minute, what about all this? I actually think the simplicity of it is really helpful in the sense of the three. So those are my kind of initial thoughts. But I guess one other thing, and I've started to look at the inputs, and I've also noticed the word equity and the impact. I wonder if there's some way of reflecting that, the diversity of input perspectives is going to be really important here.
Well, hold that thought, Sarah.
That may be somewhere in the inputs, because I haven't really looked at those yet, but it just strikes me that kind of, that richness, that diversity, less often. I've turned myself off again here. Oh, get the hang of it eventually.
No, thanks, Sarah. No, it's really great feedback, and that thought about the diversity you need to include is one of the key questions that I've kind of got, really. I'm just thinking for this session, I don't know how much time we're really going to have to dig into a lot of these different bits. Maybe we'll flag them a little bit in sort of a few minutes. And I think probably it'd be great, if you're up for it, to have one session on the theory of change to dive into it, because these questions we have around, for example, how widely, and Cole might have some good experience and some advice around this, like how widely do you need to engage with the whole system in order to make a start, and what trouble can that lead to in the future if you haven't engaged a key element you didn't realize was a key element until later on, and you kind of ostracized them, or you created a negative relationship somehow. So these kind of like dynamics obviously are key, and it's important to get a careful balance of them. And then absolutely, about the conditions of possibility, I think that's going to be on Hannah's I don't want to say tombstone because it's a bit morbid, but I think we know what I mean. I think it should be your LinkedIn profile tagline, at least, Hannah, creating the conditions of possibility. So but that's it is kind of summarized, I think, in different language in that impact box, and that's really what we are aiming to do through this collective wave, work, is to achieve that effectively. But Cole, what are your sort of thoughts and feedback on this?
That's good. I think Sarah articulated a lot of the stuff that's been going on in my head prior to today about all of this stuff, and kind of reflection there. I think certainly around the sort of the risk of linearity with theories of change, like if you do this, that, you get the result, and just being mindful of that's why I put that link into the vector theory of change as something that kind of recognizes that if we are operating in the space of complexity, that things might change, and will change in some shape. It's the only thing that you can be certain of is unintended consequences. I think the thing that sort of sits with me with a lot of this stuff is I think I boiled it down recently to saying it's like working in this space is like walking in a bog in a fog.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is like the basis of this. Like, to come back to your questions, like this idea that if only we map everything, we can get to see everything, and then we can operate. It's like we don't have time for that. And also, if we do, we're just setting ourselves up for kind of like the wrong kind of paradigm. So to me, it's like, what's the just enough certainty to take that next step and then explore from there? And I think, to me, both in terms of organizations like this, how we do that, and also as a skill or a set of behaviors or ways of being in organizations, that's what we've not really nurtured so much. So I'm kind of coming at this one both as personal practice, but also to help support others as well. So this definitely resonates like the words and the phrase in those particular things as well. And I think theory of change is that language that is a bit more translatable in different contexts as well, which I think kind of bridges across, because I'm very mindful with this language, it can become quite esoteric and switches other people off as well. So I feel like the translation and the humanness of this is kind of like really important as well. We can talk about this, but if you're going to be talking to people who this will be quite new, the barrier to entry always feels very high. The other thing I'll just add into the mix, this resonates with a lot of other spaces that I've been in as well. So I think there's some dot joining that I could probably do on this front to help out. So, you know, certainly like the human learning system stuff, like that seems to be quite prevalent at the moment. And be looking into like cornerstone indicators as well, like how do you measure impact in comparison? Then I was chatting to Peter Lafort from Essex, who's doing a load of stuff here, and I think there was like interest and appetite for Peter to come to Bristol as well. So I think there's like loads of like people to connect some dots with there. And then just finally on the equity point there, definitely I think I was thinking a lot around like design justice, decolonizing design as well. So some stuff that'd be interested to bring into. I've been chatting to Carl about co-design. Rather than doing something maybe next year as well, which I need to look into. But I can feel like that practice of being in the space, especially when it's really uncomfortable, is kind of part of that work as well. I'll pause there.
Being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Carl. I think something Sarah picked up on as well is like there is this thing about non-linear. I think we've got this tension, right, between trying to present something which is a systems-led theory of change, which gets away a bit from the non-linearity kind of doctrine. And I'm also thinking about whether we can move away from phases, the word phase. I think the compromise we need to get to is like when we are presenting this to people who have the money to fund the work we want to do, they often, they kind of operate in the linear paradigm. We do this, we expect X impact and outcome, which can be measured but then we'll give you the money. And we want to have, a really structured approach that we know how to manage and has stage gates and different outputs at certain points and things like this. So I think that's, all the tension of working within this environment. And, I know Carl, you're really experienced, and Hannah as well, like in doing that and kind of almost playing the game a bit to present something in a way where it's comfortable that funders will back it, but that embeds a lot of, systems change best practice as well. So yeah, exactly. Trojan horses. Yeah. So I think that's part of our thinking behind this. What I might do for the next sort of 5 minutes is just, we've got basically 3 other slides which dig into a few of the questions I was kind of thinking about for these phases. I think the challenge will be is if we talk much more about them, we're going to run out of time a little bit for the rest of the stuff we were going to discuss today. So I'll just whiz through them a bit and kind of highlight a few key questions. And I think hopefully it will spark a few ideas, and I think it will be a really rich experience to come back with you guys and dig into it in a bit more detail. Basically, what we were looking to do a bit more was kind of like within this phase of explore and experiment, think about this as like, this is a systems learning activity. The systems learning kind of activity, what activities would that actually be? What kind of stuff would we actually do? What some of the outputs might be and what some of the outcomes might be? So those sort of 3 things and these key questions, right? So what part of the system do we understand well? Where are the biggest gaps of understanding? How might we overcome that? So that might be something around stakeholder mapping, interview management, going and kind of embedding ourselves within some systems, for example. How do you do that? What's some good practice that people have seen? How important is it to fully engage all stakeholders at this point? So you go back to Carl's point about, at what point can we just start? What's kind of good enough in this space, and how do we kind of have some measure of that, I suppose? How do we de-risk some of that as well? How do we kind of provide opportunity for people or groups to feed in to some activities and not kind of be exclusive? Or should you just be exclusive? Just appreciate that's something that's going to happen. I think the answer is probably it depends, as most of these things. on what work you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. How will our work connect existing groups and initiatives rather than duplicate? So again, we want to come in as a catalyst, not just repeating stuff which has been done before. And I think just jumping down to the bottom of this question list, there's a thing about doing experiments in a way which are co-productive and not being seen as being done to and done with instead. So often there can be a lot of change fatigue and stuff in these complex and challenging environments. So kind of, best practice around positioning ourselves as, helpful actors is a really important thing. So how do we get started? How do we build that kind of reputation and sort of, reputation within the system that we're there to do good and we're there to be helpful and we can provide value quickly? I think it's really important. Some other things in here about what are some of the feedback loops, and also how can we evaluate and learn from these activities. So yeah, some kind of key questions which we could dig into, I'm sure, just for an hour, just those questions. But yeah, cool. I support with this, which might help. Cool, thanks, Carl. I'll read that in a second. So reflection and partnerships. So some questions here around how to capture and assess key systems learnings. Yeah, how do we do that? What are good frameworks for that? This is not new work which is done in the systems world, but there's different schools of thought and different methods and models we can look at. So yeah, experiences around that and tools to use would be interesting to discuss. How to identify and qualify those partners who've shared mission and long-term stake in the system. What about the gaps? So kind of looking for authenticity and long-termism. I guess I'm thinking particularly around kind of place-based initiatives, and I guess there's a thing about working with people who have had a long-term stake and are well known within those systems. If we're looking at place-based, but sometimes that can result in the same people. It's always the same people doing the same things. So there's kind of a tension or a dynamic there to be aware of, and bringing new into the system, bringing new ideas, new innovation, new relationships. How to assess what enabling conditions need to be strengthened or revised. How do we define enabling conditions? Might be a good place to start. How to translate these learnings into next steps. And then next steps, we go to the next slide, Yasmin. This would be about, kind of that emerging impact. So how might we independently verify signals of change that can be sustained? So again, thinking about the experiments, right, and where things work and have kind of their own dynamic and have their own energy behind them and are acting themselves as catalyzing new change, new positive change in a certain direction. All practices, tools, or learning mechanisms can be embedded into organizational community structures. So I think we're all of us, myself, Hannah, Yasmin, are really interested in sort of the education piece behind systems change, and trying to kind of encourage more thinking towards this sort of complexity and systems thinking paradigm, and things like being comfortable with the uncomfortable and things like that, and sort of recognizing that as a good success factor in some ways, because it means you're actually testing the system in some ways. Whereas if you're in a completely comfortable environment and everyone's just nodding along and saying yes all the time, maybe we're not doing the sort of system change which needs to be done. So there's something around like an educational thing, which is both the kind of methodology and the principles behind doing systems leadership, the systems change, and also the kind of like almost like emotional kind of like attachment to some of it as well. What capacity still needs strengthening to sustain this work independently? Not sure what that means, to be honest. Sarah might know, she's nodding. Where do we still see fragmentation or resistance within the system? What does this reveal about remaining structural barriers? Yeah, so I think that is actually pretty self-explanatory, right? So yeah, what structural barriers might be in place that we need to resolve or work through or adjust in some way that might be restricting some innovation, some change to happen. That's often removing barriers is actually often a key thing within the systems change. Like, well, did you do much? Well, we had to actually make this small change, this change to this barrier to unlock new innovation capacity within the system, right? And there's a really nice phrase. I don't know, Yes might know where it was coined, but it was about, oh, hi Ian, all right, good to see you. We're just talking through the last slide and our theory of change a little bit. So yeah, we're going to skip on in a minute, but we can we'd love to talk with you a little bit more about this. Just talking a bit about structural barriers within systems change work, and how we might address some of those, and that will sort of guide how we deliver on our systems work in the future. And I was just mentioning that I think Yasmin be familiar with the phrase about not resolving problems but dissolving them. I think is one of the kind of mantras of the systems innovation kind of group that we've been part of before, and probably a familiar phrase people on this call. And then the kind of final point at the bottom here is about long-term risks or unintended consequences that might arise as changes embedded within the system. So kind of impacts both positive and negative, and kind of how do we, what tools, methodologies might be in place or we might use to kind of review impact really. So yeah, we've kind of just gone through that in a bit of a quick fire, and I think a lot of questions, which we kind of invite maybe to have a full session on it at some point. But yeah, just a bit of an overview for now. That's where we're at. That's kind of what we're thinking in terms of a theory of change. So yeah, I think we're gonna move on to the next piece now.
Sure. I think, Sarah, I don't know if you can still hear us, but we can have a moment in the end for other questions and comments. Maybe can type it in the chat that she can go out and come back if she can't hear us. Maybe that sorts something out.
I'll send Sarah a message.
Cool. So quickly present some of the theoretical or foundations or the ideas that we stand on, and these were created and thought in was based on a question that we had on our last session, that what topics do you consider, or what are the main areas in which you work with? And essentially because we understand the wicked complex challenges are very interrelated, and we can't have a specific thematic answer from a very transdisciplinary problem, right? So our idea is to bring 4 main clusters of ideas that influence the work that we do, but they're not really restricted or confined in a specific topic of education or climate or economy or other things like that, because they're all really embedded in each other. But nevertheless, we have some pillars that we want to embed in as much as possible in all the activities that we do. So essentially, these 4 main pillars are systems, complexity, and transitions thinking. This is the main rethinking part of the foundations of the ideas that we think about. So we are let me go to the next one. We are essentially going to repurpose how we think about the problems themselves, and then put the idea of wicked problems, as James mentioned, and systems thinking, complexity, and all of that, which provides a different language to talk about the problems and the challenges there are. And based on that, we go, again, this is not a cycle or a circle of topics. These are very they're standalone, but they all embed within each other, right? And the second pillar is futures, imagination, and strategic foresight. So based on the current scenario, it can be very difficult to foresee a future, to understand what futures are, and to even think about possible ways ahead. And this is what this futures section consists of. So methods, even frameworks to help us think about the future in a way that is, of course, academically and research based, but also that influences the practice of what we do. And this is a very important one to help us guide the activities in ways that are not, they have a ground to stand on, right? And so these are more the thoughtful, let's say, thinking pieces. And then here we have more of the practical pieces, which is regenerative and just society. So here thinking about what are the examples that are already there in terms of regenerative practices, biomimicry examples, just transitions. And I think Kyle mentioned before, right, the indigenous and ancestral knowledge systems, or the decolonial practices that are already there. So these are all very important in getting inspiration from the present and what our other communities are already doing. But also the last one is more about the practice in our local community. As I think you mentioned before as well, Carl, co-creation, co-design methodologies. How can we embed our communities in creating this future that we want to be a part of, democratically involving different perspectives and different cultures and backgrounds, the importance of storytelling to involve the diversity of perspectives and experiences in co-creating this collective generally. And that's, in a nutshell, the foundations of our work. And I will talk more about projects that are going to involve these pillars that we are already putting in place, that involve these pillars, and how you can participate in these activities as well. But I'll quickly pass it over to Hannah, and then we'll go to Q&A, and then we can all discuss about that. You're on mute, Hannah. Sorry.
Thanks, Yasmin. If we move to the first slide. So in our last session, someone asked about our structure and how we engage in our partnership. And so this is just a couple of quick slides to talk people through this. As a team, we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about how we make this a community and not a hierarchy. We explored a lot of different models, and this is the concept we came up with. And I'll just talk through it now. So obviously the center of the rings is our mission, which is to create the conditions to empower communities in taking action on important and challenging social issues in today's world. We envision a world in which communities are critical, continuous learners, and actively committed to a collective, fair, and united future. And I think that speaks to the point you were making earlier, Sarah, about some of the stuff from the theory of change. If we move on to the next slide. So the core team is us, essentially, James, Yasmin, and I. We have had other members join the core team, and we recognise capacity and availability, and we balance that against commitment. But essentially the core team is the group of people who are willing to invest time in this work, regardless of funding or anything else, because we think this work is important. This work is important enough for our time and energy in driving a new kind of way of doing things, a new system towards our mission and vision. And so we welcome people to join the core team, but it does require a commitment and a level of engagement. And we three have been a consistent members since our inception a few years ago. So, however, recognizing that people often don't want to jump into a full commitment from the beginning, we've got wider areas of engagement. So we have this wider ring of network catalysts. So this is people who are working with us or connecting with us, or perhaps sharing joint projects or sharing ideas or just attending sessions. And it's about people with a shared value and mission, but not necessarily with the capacity or even the interest to be part of a core delivery team. But if a network catalyst attended a few events and was interested in joining the core team, that's an open option, and we welcome that. And then we've got the wider network, which is potentially people we know. It's the rest of the world, essentially. And we recognise that there's movement between these networks, these rings, and our model. I suppose our model is entirely based on willingness to commit and commitment to our mission, essentially. Okay. What's interesting, I will just share one reflection before we move on to the next thing, is that we did spend a lot of time working out a model that allowed fluidity and acknowledging people's capacity and varying other complications in life that might mean that they might move through those different rings. And what I think one of the things we've experienced with that is a little bit of confusion about that model, because we're working against what's essentially a patriarchal and colonialistic model in quite a lot of other systems. So unless people are directly told where they are and what their role is and things, it can be quite challenging. So I think even having this model opens up conversations to explore these kinds of things. Yeah, okay, moving on. So we also just wanted to kind of illustrate what that looks like in practice. So we've just mapped some of the roles and work that we're doing into these wider areas. So we're building our partnership with the Schumacher Institute. We've got some projects coming through with Streams Learning Hub, and the core team have been delivering a range of projects and organisational aspirations as part of our core team. So Yasmin has been leading an interview in a system change, system innovation author series for over a year, and we'll be continuing that in 2026. And I understand you've already got some exciting people lined up for that. Yasmin and I are working on a storytelling project, which we're hoping to launch next year. And I'm really excited about, what's the name we went for? Is it Stories of Hope?
Hopeful Futures.
Hopeful Futures. Very, very excited to be working on something that's just about sharing joy. And I think the reason I'm so excited about it is we want to give people an idea of what's achievable. And so we're kind of going to go and spend some time interviewing with people who are doing what we're talking about already, without realizing that they're part of a wider system and contributing to this wider impact. And then all of the comms and kind of internal organization stuff is how the core team as well. That's it. And then we're on to, I think, the Q&A bit. So just a bit of a chance to have a discussion and share any reflections that have come up through this meeting. We've got a minute. Or we could take a few minutes if people have time. Should we stop sharing the screen?
Yes.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, also just to quickly comment that in these rings, these are some of the activities that we've initiated with partners such as the Schumacher Institute and the Streams Learning Hub as our a partner for a systems thinking program for young people. So we also welcome if you have a project that you'd like to participate, that you'd like us to participate, or you'd like somewhere that in some ways that we can support, or in any way, please let us know. And also we are going to continue some type of a study group or learning space next year, going more in depth into the foundations that I mentioned before. And the format that's going to take is still open in a way. We've tried some formats this year and they weren't optimal. So it would be good to hear from you as well. How do you feel you would like to put your time and energy in the group, or how we can support the projects that you already have going on, and see how we can merge both of these interests and space and capacity and yeah, everything in between. So I'll stop talking now. And yeah, if you have questions and comments, please fire away.
I just say my apologies for being late. I had it down at 12:30. I don't quite sure why, but I'd love to see the slides that came before the one I came in on, if you could. Thank you. But the one slide that really took my attention was the 4 different areas of work that you're looking at, and for quite a while I've been thinking a lot about it's back a bit that one, and this one, this sort of the sort of how you do it, this sort of those 4 areas, and I feel that is so brilliant. It just encompasses everything I've been thinking of for so long, that I'm using the phrase complex systems foresight as a kind of a catch-all for where we are, and it very much relates to the sort of the complexity sciences, looking at what is, what systems really are, while systems is how do we do it, how do we find out about it, our knowledge bases, and foresight is what are these systems becoming. It's again a different take on sort of ontologies, really. They're, where are they going, what are the trends, where are the global issues that are affecting everything, and can we sort of see that sort of spectrum of the future as to what we might need to be prepared for. So I was absolutely gobsmacked, I think, by looking at that slide and how you then elaborated it, because I thought, wow, this is everything I've been thinking about for such a long time. And so I'm delighted that you are tackling it and sort of getting stuck into this way of working. So yeah, that was my comment, and my long apology for getting the time wrong.
Thanks, Ian. Really appreciate that feedback. It's really interesting, actually. I was thinking about as well, as you're just talking, in terms of there would be good discussion to have with everyone about what the sort of target environment is. So I think there's this because you're making me thinking about the development of the rapid development of these systems is happening, and the world is systems of the world are rapidly changing in complex and unknown ways. And there's a thing around sort of the entrenched system actors and sort of power brokers should be moving more towards systems thinking principles, because it would help them actually to achieve their goals, but also should help in some ways that the systems sort of could become more fair and equitable in many ways, kind of the top-down sort of approach. But then I think we've also, we've all usually come from a background of sort of working more of a community level, kind of bottom-up sort of approach. And so, yeah, I don't think we've landed on one way or the other yet, but I think our starting point is probably being more community focused, because that's where our kind of existing relationships and kind of interests lie. But yeah, there certainly is a need for the going to the kind of top level as well, I suppose.
I was just thinking about as you were talking, James, and Ian as well, about something about leadership, and it's maybe that's for another conversation. Community leadership. What do we, what kind of leadership are we interested in nourishing? And without using the term systems leadership, because I think it's become possibly a bit hackneyed or overused. And I sort of, it's an interesting thing, because there's so much that you've given us today, and I think at some point I sort of felt a bit overwhelmed. Probably would just love to reflect on some of it a bit more. And I don't know if you feel comfortable to share the slides and not, know that they're not going to go more widely at this stage, but I would kind of welcome that. And the word nourishment, and it might have been because Kyle was cooking his lunch, I don't know, the food thing came back into my head, but there's something about the language that's so powerful, that peppering in these alternative ways of kind of getting across the message that this is about nourishing and I appreciate also you were saying, Azmin, about having an evidence base, having drawing on the good kind of literature, the emerging practice that's been documented, the experiments that have been written up. All that stuff is really important, and at the same time the language is quite dense, isn't it? And how do we, when we start to communicate this more broadly, or maybe even now, we could explore that peppering, that nourishment idea. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring in different language in our what we're writing now, what you're writing and drafting. So that was it from me.
It's such an important point, Sarah. We are constantly on this knife edge of accessibility versus complexity and confusion versus having enough understanding to really acknowledge what we're talking about. It's so tricky. We talk about it a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also something that I've been thinking about is, of course, really this topic of language is very important, but also the formats in which this language is presented or being delivered and discovered. So I think last year, as Hannah said, well, this year, we're not done yet. We've been doing the book author series, and that has been great because it gives a format for people to access maybe a book that they wouldn't be able to read in a 90-minute presentation by the authors themselves that are going to share some insights, and the way that they present that language is going to be different than reading the book, right? So also the formats matter, and that's why we started the interviews, and we are going to open the study groups for more reading oriented or more discussion based spaces that are not for everyone, right? But they are also another format, and depending on the consistency of them, we can evolve the language that we use as well, and change how we present these ideas and so forth. So yeah, just to say that we are very into, and we think a lot about this idea of the language, but also the diverse ways in which we can access and be involved in this type of work. Yeah, Kyle, share.
Yeah, I've got too many thoughts. I think the food point is something I was thinking about that throughout this as well, like just people cooking together a meal. That's the essence of all of this, and that kind of active convening and the relationship building. I think is so fundamental. Also, like just food is like kind of like the sort of the way to translate a lot of these things. Like growing food in the garden is complex, that's and I think it's like it's not some sort of highfalutin concept, it's just a lived reality. I think people say like organizing children's birthday party, that's like those kinds of things as well is kind of the experience we have every day living this. Is not just some sort of weird academic thing, but there is a space for that if you want to kind of get into it. So I think from my side, again, it's like learner and sort of practitioner, that space, like being able to talk about this is really important, because otherwise we'll just get into this like internal feedback loop. But for me, the challenge I've got for myself is moving away from the academic to the practical, just getting on with stuff to do. And I think particularly the sort of locality as well, I think is quite important, given the challenges that we face as a society, environmentally, etc. And I think like building up that capacity, capability, and those relationship networks, I think is fundamental and needs to be built now. And these sort of spaces, these organizations, as a way to do that and build that fabric of resilience for the future, I think is incredibly important. And so for me, that's kind of why I'm drawn to this in terms of like the practice of this. And I think, you know, the sort of the hexagon things that you had there, the 4, that covers everything. Like similar to what Ian was saying, I was like, oh thank God, someone's like listed it down. So it was like sort of like yeah, reducing the overwhelm was really good. So I sort of resonate with that. It's still a long list. Now I suppose what I'm left with is like how do we move forward and do these things? And I suppose just to kind of ask that question is like, where's the money coming from? You know, those kind of things as well, because, you know, this does exist with like sort of existing system, and sort of for everyone here, there's only a finite amount of energy. And just know everyone else who's working in these spaces get burnt out so easily. Like, where's that space of care and protection to kind of like contain and support throughout this is what I'm interested in as well. And I was thinking a lot about Regen Melbourne as well, you know, all the work that they're doing as well, which I kind of feel like they've turned something that's kind of like donor economics based into something that's a bit more practical in a way that's kind of self-sustaining in a way. So I'm just wondering if there's kind of like crude like business models to follow which enable to sort of that sustenance in the future as well. So I'd be interested to see a bit more on that in due course. Yeah, I'll pause that.
I just, in response to your space for care and protection, this space for me is one of mine. Working with Collective Wave is a space of care and protection that's kept me going through, because in this world, burnouts like this, right, you're always kind of, you know, somewhere at risk of it because of how much needs doing and the complexity of things. And this group has kept me grounded, working with this group. It's been great.
Yeah, it has been very fun way of thinking about these very difficult and challenging topics, but in a space that we feel that we are heard, and we feel that our words really resonate. So everyone that comes here, they're always have been very supportive of the work, and it has been great, this journey. But yeah, there is this bit, as you're saying, Kyle, of the how can we go to the next level and then start getting some money to support this work that we do. It's not really it's really to put some fuel in creating more of this work for with better quality and for more people, right? And we are going to start the fundraising process now. More on that possibly in the future when we are a bit more robust with that, and possibly, for example, the study groups or these spaces, we can charge a small amount possibly per month, and we would have the sessions hosted maybe bi-weekly, and some resources and extra, loads of things, but to also help us keep going with the activities that we're doing in other areas of the Collective Wave. So this is, a conversation that we're having at the moment and still ongoing. But if you have any inputs or any ideas on this space as well, we're more than welcome to hear them and see other perspectives that we may not be seeing right now. Yeah. I think it's time. I know some other people have other things to do right now, and we're really on time. But really would like to thank everyone for joining us, and I think it's been a great conversation. We will host some other sessions in the future, and we'll keep you posted to what's coming next. But in the meantime, I wish you all a great holiday, great end of the year, and this moment of winding down possibly, and having some inner reflective moments, so we can start the year again well and energized for a new path. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Jasmine. Yeah, great to see you all. Happy Christmas.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Brilliant.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye
Take
bye.
care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.